Sophia's day began like any other. The soft glow of the morning sun seeped through the cracks of the blinds, bathing the bedroom in a warm, golden light. She stretched lazily, her hand instinctively reaching for the empty space beside her. David had been leaving early for the past few weeks, claiming that the workload at the office had intensified. Sophia didn't think much of it. After all, running a family business was no easy task, and David was the kind of man who threw himself wholeheartedly into every project. After a quick shower, Sophia dressed in a simple blouse and skirt, opting for comfort over style. She padded downstairs, her thoughts already filled with the day ahead. They had a meeting with one of their long-standing clients, a luxury car dealership that was looking to expand its marketing efforts. Sophia had spent the previous night drafting a proposal, fine-tuning the presentation that she knew would impress them. She loved the challenge of crafting strategies, finding the perfect words to convey the client's vision. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen as Sophia poured herself a cup. She took a sip, savoring the bitterness, while her gaze lingered on the calendar pinned to the fridge. Next week marked the 12th anniversary of the business, a venture that had started as just an idea sketched out on a napkin during a dinner date. Back then, they were young and fearless, willing to put everything on the line. Sophia handled the numbers and client relations, while David focused on creative direction and networking. They were a team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. As she pulled into the office parking lot, Sophia noticed something odd. Carla's car was already there. Carla had only been with them for a few months, a fresh-faced assistant with impeccable organizational skills and an enthusiasm that sometimes bordered on overbearing. David had hired her on the spot after one interview, declaring her the perfect addition to the team. Sophia nodded cautiously. Okay. David sighed heavily. We've been facing some challenges lately, and I think we need to restructure. We're not as efficient as we could be, and, well, it's time to make some changes. Sophia furrowed her brows. What kind of changes? Sophia didn't disagree. Carla was efficient and attentive, always eager to please. But lately, Sophia couldn't help but notice how Carla's eagerness seemed directed more at David than at her tasks. Shaking off the thought, Sophia walked into the building, greeted by the familiar hum of productivity. The small office space bustled with activity, the sound of phones ringing and keyboards clacking blending into a sort of rhythmic chaos. Her assistant, Megan, gave her a sympathetic smile as she passed by. It was odd, Sophia thought, but didn't dwell on it. Heading to her office, she noticed David's door ajar and heard muted voices inside. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle, when suddenly the door swung open. David stood there, his face an unreadable mask, and Carla lingered behind him, her cheeks flushed. "Good morning," Sophia greeted them, forcing a smile. David didn't respond right away. He glanced at Carla, who gave him a slight nod before slipping past Sophia, avoiding eye contact. Sophia's heart sank as David gestured for her to enter. Once the door clicked shut behind her, she took a seat across from his desk, her eyes searching his face for clues. David cleared his throat, avoiding her gaze. "Sophia, we need to talk." A knot formed in her stomach. "What's going on?" He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I've been thinking about the business, about how we run things here." He hesitated, and for a moment, his mask cracked, revealing a glimpse of guilt. "I've decided to let you go." The words hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't have heard that right. "Excuse me?" David forced a tight smile. "It's nothing personal, really. Just, with the way things are going, it makes sense to streamline operations. Carla will be taking over your responsibilities." Sophia's mind reeled. "You're firing me? From a company we built together?" David glanced at the desk, as if the polished would held the answers. "I'm the majority shareholder, Sophia. I have the authority to make staffing decisions." Sophia's chest tightened. "This isn't just about efficiency, is it? This is about Carla." He didn't deny it. That silence spoke louder than any words. Sophia's hands trembled, but she forced herself to remain calm. "You're replacing me with her." David's jaw tightened. "Carla is capable. She understands what needs to be done. And frankly, your approach has been, outdated. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I built this company with you. You can't just push me out like I'm nothing. David avoided her gaze. It's done, Sophia. I'll have HR process the paperwork today. You'll receive a severance package. It's generous. Sophia stood up slowly, her legs shaky. Generous? She whispered, incredulous. You think money can compensate for this betrayal? David didn't respond. She swallowed the bile rising in her throat and turned toward the door, needing to escape before her composure shattered. As she walked through the office, she felt the eyes of her co-workers on her, sympathetic, cautious, some even curious. Back in her car, Sophia let the tears flow. The reality of what just happened washed over her like a tidal wave. 12 years of hard work, of sacrifices, of building a life together, erased with a few cold words. And for what? For an assistant half her age with a perfect smile and a penchant for flattery. Sophia gripped the steering wheel, anger igniting in the pit of her stomach. She wasn't just heartbroken, she was furious. How dare he? How dare he reduce her to nothing more than a replaceable part of the business she had helped create? She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think logically. She needed to go home, gather her thoughts, and figure out what to do next. But as the initial shock subsided, something else took its place: determination. David might think he had won, but Sophia wasn't about to let him walk away unscathed. As she drove away from the office, her mind began to race. There had to be a way to fight back. She had poured her soul into that business, and David wasn't going to just take it from her. Not without a fight. Little did David know, in his rush to secure his new future with Carla, he had overlooked one crucial detail. A small, unassuming file Sophia had kept tucked away, forgotten in the back of a dusty drawer. A file that would soon become her most powerful weapon. Sophia sat in the middle of her living room floor, surrounded by scattered papers, folders, and documents that once represented the life she had built alongside David. The house felt empty, its walls echoing with silence. It was the same home they had purchased 5 years ago when the business started to thrive, a place that once radiated warmth and love, but now felt like a hollow shell. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the chill of the empty space, as if the very air had turned against her. The shock of being fired had begun to wear off, replaced by a simmering anger that refused to be quelled. How could David do this to her? How could he look her in the eyes and claim that it was a business decision when it was obvious that Carla was now the one occupying not just her office, but also her husband's bed? Sophia clenched her fists, her jaw tight, as she fought the tears threatening to spill. Crying wouldn't help. Self-pity wouldn't bring back her position at the company or erase the humiliation of being discarded like a piece of outdated furniture. No, she needed to think. She needed to act. She pulled a large storage box toward her, its lid dusty from neglect. This box contained everything: contracts, tax returns, client agreements, and financial statements. David might have taken control of the office, but he couldn't take away the meticulous record Sophia had kept for years. She began sorting through the documents, her hands shaking slightly as she thumbed through the thick stack of papers. Most of it was mundane: old invoices, marketing plans, client lists, but she needed to find something, anything that could give her an edge. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the room was now lit only by the soft, yellow glow of the floor lamp. Papers surrounded her like a protective fort, and Sophia felt a sense of urgency that kept her eyes scanning every line, every word. She had gone through most of the box when her fingers brushed against a thin manila folder. It was tucked beneath a stack of old receipts, its edges frayed and slightly crumpled. Sophia frowned, pulling it out and placing it on her lap. The label read, "Company Assets, Confidential." Sophia's pulse quickened. How had she missed this? She carefully opened the folder and began flipping through the pages. It contained various documents, mostly related to asset allocation and stock distribution. Her eyes moved rapidly over the words, her brain working to connect the dots. And then, buried near the back of the folder, she found it. A single sheet of paper marked stock transfer agreement. Sophia's breath caught in her throat as she scanned the document. The agreement was dated 2 years ago, a time when the company had been expanding rapidly, and they had considered bringing in outside investors. David had drawn up the agreement as a precautionary measure, transferring a significant portion of his shares to Sophia to protect their assets in case of a hostile takeover. And then it all made sense. In his rush to push her out of the company and secure his future with Carla, David had completely forgotten about this document. A slow, grim smile spread across Sophia's face. The agreement was signed by both of them, notarized and legally binding. And as it stood, it made her the majority shareholder. The implications were staggering. David had been so focused on claiming control, on ousting her from the business, that he had overlooked the one document that could ruin him. The realization sent a thrill of adrenaline through Sophia's veins. But she couldn't act impulsively. David was cunning and ruthless. He wouldn't go down without a fight. Sophia knew she had to play her cards right. She carefully slid the document back into the folder, sealing it tightly before placing it in a lockbox. She couldn't risk David finding out she had it. Not yet. Over the next few days, Sophia moved with a calculated calm. She contacted an attorney, someone who specialized in corporate law and had a reputation for being both strategic and discreet. They met in a small, nondescript office, and Sophia laid out everything: the betrayal, the firing, the stock transfer agreement. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Elaine, listened intently, her expression betraying nothing. When Sophia finished, Elaine leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "You have him by the throat," she said simply, "but we need to proceed carefully. If he finds out you have this document, he'll try to invalidate it. You need to keep it hidden until we're ready to present it." Sophia nodded, her jaw set. "What we do now?" Elaine smiled, a predatory glint in her eyes. "We wait. Let him get comfortable. Let him believe he's won. When the divorce proceedings begin, that's when we strike." Sophia left the office with a renewed sense of purpose. The document felt like a burning secret in her pocket, a weapon waiting to be unleashed. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that David was up to something. Carla had been flaunting her new position as executive manager, a title David had clearly invented to legitimize her takeover. Employees who once reported to Sophia were now taking orders from Carla, who strutted around the office as if she owned the place. One afternoon, Sophia drove past the office, her car moving slowly along the curb. Through the glass windows, she saw Carla sitting in her old office chair, feet up on the desk, laughing at something David had said. The sight made Sophia's stomach churn. But it wasn't just Carla's presence that bothered her. It was the way David looked, disheveled, his shirt untucked, dark circles under his eyes. He looked frantic, as if he were barely holding it together. Sophia parked the car around the corner and watched as David paced back and forth in his office, gesturing wildly as he spoke on the phone. His movements were erratic, his expression tight with stress. Sophia leaned back in her seat, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the steering wheel. Was David panicking? Was the company in trouble? Was he struggling to keep up with the workload that she once handled with ease? The thought brought a surge of grim satisfaction. Let him sweat, she thought. Let him feel what it's like to lose control. Back home, Sophia reviewed the divorce papers David's lawyer had sent over. They were dense, filled with legal jargon and numbers that seemed to favor David in every way. According to the agreement, Sophia was to receive a minimal settlement. The house would be sold and the proceeds split, and David would retain full control of the company. Sophia chuckled darkly, setting the papers aside. He was already counting her out, already erasing her from the life they had built. But he had no idea what she held in her hands. That night, Sophia lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as rain pattered against the window pane. Images of Carla and David flashed through her mind. The smug looks, the whispered conversations, the way Carla had smirked when she passed Sophia in the hallway that day. "You think you've won," Sophia thought, her nails digging into her palms. You think you've stolen my life, my work, my husband. But you missed one tiny, crucial detail. And when the time was right, she would show them exactly what they had missed. The day of the divorce signing arrived with a chill in the air, the kind that seeped through layers of clothing and into the bones. The sky was overcast, a dense blanket of gray clouds hanging low over the city, as if nature itself was bracing for what was to come. Sophia stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. She had chosen a sleek black dress, understated yet powerful, the kind that commanded attention without saying a word. Her makeup was flawless, her hair pulled back into a low chignon, every strand in place. Today, she was not the woman David had dismissed as irrelevant. Today, she was the woman he had underestimated. Sophia took a deep breath, the folder containing the stock transfer agreement resting on the dresser beside her. She hadn't shown it to Elaine yet. There had been no need. Today, David and his lawyer would see it for the first time, and the impact would be far more devastating if they had no time to prepare. Sophia picked up the folder, tucking it carefully into her handbag, her fingers tightening around the handle as if drawing strength from it. This was her ace, her final move, and she had to play it perfectly. The law firm's office was located in a sleek, modern building downtown, its glass exterior reflecting the stormy sky. As Sophia stepped into the lobby, the sterile scent of polished floors and fresh coffee filled the air. The receptionist directed her to the conference room on the top floor, her eyes lingering on Sophia for a beat longer than necessary. Perhaps she had heard about the scandal. The wife fired from her own company by her husband for his assistant. Sophia straightened her spine and walked toward the elevator, each step resonating with quiet confidence. The elevator doors slid open, and she stepped inside, her reflection staring back at her from the polished steel walls. The woman who had once been meek, heartbroken, and humiliated was gone. In her place stood someone who was calm, collected, and ready to dismantle David's smug facade piece by piece. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened to the top floor. Sophia stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she approached the glass-walled conference room. Through the transparent barrier, she saw them. David sat at the head of the table, his fingers drumming impatiently against the polished surface. Next to him was Carla, her manicured nails tapping against her phone screen as if she were bored by the entire ordeal. David's lawyer, a burly man in a pinstripe suit, was flipping through a stack of documents, his expression smug and self-assured. Elaine was already seated at the opposite end of the table, her posture relaxed, her sharp eyes focused on David and his entourage. When she saw Sophia approaching, she gave a slight nod, her expression unreadable. Sophia pushed open the door, and all eyes turned to her. David's jaw clenched, his gaze raking over her appearance as if searching for any sign of weakness. Carla smirked, her lips painted a shade of red that was too bright, too bold, too eager. But it was David's lawyer who spoke first. "Sophia," he said, his tone dripping with false warmth. "Glad you could make it. Let's get started, shall we?" Sophia offered a polite, insincere smile as she took her seat beside Elaine, setting her handbag carefully on the table. David's lawyer slid a stack of papers across the table, his gaze hardening as he leaned forward. "These are the final divorce settlement documents. We've outlined the division of assets, including the sale of the marital home, the financial settlement, and the transfer of business shares." Sophia's heart pounded, but her face remained a mask of calm. She flipped through the pages, her eyes skimming over the text. The terms were as expected, heavily skewed in David's favor. According to the document, she would receive a minimal financial settlement, far less than what she was entitled to, and David would retain full control of the company. The marital home would be sold, and the proceeds split evenly, but considering the current market value, Sophia would walk away with little more than a pittance. Elaine leaned over, her voice low and firm. "Sophia, are you ready to proceed?" Sophia took a deep breath, lifting her gaze to meet David's eyes. "Before I sign anything, there's something I need to show you." David's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. What is it now, Sophia? More accusations? More melodrama? Sophia ignored him, reaching into her handbag and pulling out the manila folder. She set it on the table, her fingers sliding the stock transfer agreement across to David's lawyer. This is a document David seems to have forgotten about. David's lawyer frowned, his eyes narrowing as he picked up the paper. As he read, his expression changed, the color draining from his face as if he had been punched in the gut. David's smirk slipped away, his jaw tightening as he leaned forward, his eyes darting between the document and Sophia's face. "What the hell is this?" David snapped, his voice laced with a mixture of confusion and panic. Elaine's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "That, David, is a legally binding stock transfer agreement that you signed 2 years ago, transferring a significant portion of your shares to Sophia. According to this document, she is now the majority shareholder of the company." David's lawyer sputtered, his hands trembling slightly as he set the document down. This can't be right. This agreement, it's dated, signed, and notarized." "Yes, it is," Elaine said smoothly, leaning back in her chair. "And it's completely legitimate." David's face twisted into a mask of rage. "You can't do this, Sophia. This is a setup." Sophia met his glare with a calm, unyielding gaze. "A setup? David, you signed the agreement. You thought you were being clever, securing our assets in case of a hostile takeover. But now, it's you who's vulnerable." Carla shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting between David and the lawyer. The smug, confident expression she had worn when Sophia walked in had evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer panic. David leaned forward, his fists clenched against the table. "You think this changes anything? You think you could just waltz back in and take everything?" Sophia's voice was soft, but every word was razor-sharp. "I don't need to take anything, David. It's already mine." Elaine cleared her throat, her tone steely. "Now, about these settlement terms. Considering that Sophia is now the majority shareholder, we'll be revising those. First, we'll be renegotiating the division of assets. Second, we'll be discussing compensation for Sophia's wrongful termination, considering that she was unlawfully removed from a position in a company she legally controls." David's lawyer looked as though he were about to be sick, his face ashen. David, on the other hand, looked like a man on the verge of losing control. His chest heaved, his nostrils flaring, and his eyes fixed on Sophia with a glare that could have burned through steel. But Sophia didn't flinch. She held his gaze, her expression as cool and composed as the day they had met. For a moment, the room fell into a tense, suffocating silence, the weight of Sophia's power shift palpable. She had just turned the entire negotiation on its head, and David knew it. And as Sophia sat back in her chair, the faintest trace of a smile played at the corners of her lips. David had underestimated her. Carla had underestimated her. And now, with everything laid bare, they would learn exactly what she was capable of. The days following the divorce signing were a whirlwind of frantic phone calls, emergency meetings, and desperate attempts at damage control. David had underestimated the depth of Sophia's resolve and the strength of her position. The document she revealed was a game-changer, and now, everything he had tried to seize was slipping through his fingers. Sophia spent her days at Elaine's office, going through every financial record, every contract, every client agreement that David had attempted to hide or obscure. Elaine's team worked tirelessly, combing through the documents with the precision of forensic accountants, unearthing discrepancies that only someone as meticulous as Sophia would have noticed. David's lawyer had reached out several times, pleading for a renegotiation. The tone of his emails had shifted from arrogant and condescending to cautious and conciliatory. David, it seemed, was starting to realize just how much he stood to lose. Meanwhile, Carla's presence in the office had become a growing source of tension. Employees whispered in the hallways, exchanging glances whenever she walked by. The assistant who had once strutted around like a queen now moved with her shoulders hunched, her eyes darting nervously around the office. Rumors circulated that she and David were fighting, that she had caught him on the phone with another woman, that she had seen emails from other female clients containing far more than business proposals. Sophia took note of everything, but said nothing. She had learned the value of silence, the way it unsettled people, made them second-guess themselves, made them question what she knew and what she didn't. Every time David attempted to speak to her, she brushed past him with a serene smile, a nod, and nothing more. One afternoon, as Sophia sat in the corner office, the one that had once been David's, she glanced down at her phone. A notification from Elaine flashed across the screen. It was a single text. "We got him." Sophia's pulse quickened as she stood, smoothing the front of her dress. She straightened her posture, took a steadying breath, and walked confidently toward the conference room where Elaine was waiting. Inside, Elaine was seated at the head of the table, a thick file of documents spread out before her. Beside her was a man in his mid-50s, wearing a crisp navy suit and glasses that glinted under the fluorescent lights. Sophia took the seat beside Elaine, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Elaine's expression was steely, her eyes sharp. "Sophia, this is Mr. Randall Carter. He's a forensic accountant specializing in corporate fraud." Sophia nodded politely, though her mind was spinning. Corporate fraud? Elaine opened the file, revealing a stack of financial records. "We've been going through the company's books, and we've found some interesting discrepancies." Randall adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. During the last fiscal year, there were multiple transfers made to an offshore account. The amounts were significant, and the recipient was listed under a shell corporation that has no known business operations. Sophia's brow furrowed. "Who authorized these transfers?" Elaine slid a document across the table. "David did. The signature is his, but the account isn't. It's registered under Carla's name." Sophia's mouth went dry. Carla? The assistant who had wormed her way into David's life, who had taken Sophia's position, who had so gleefully watched Sophia's downfall, and now she was the one siphoning money out of the company behind David's back. "Did David know?" Sophia asked, her voice calm but tight. Randall shook his head. "Highly unlikely. From what we can tell, Carla set up the Shell Corporation months ago, around the time David was in the process of pushing you out of the company. She's been skimming off the top, using her new executive position to authorize these transfers without raising suspicion." Sophia leaned back, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Does David know?" Elaine's lips twitched. "Not yet, but he will." The meeting concluded with a plan. Elaine would gather all the evidence, compile it into a comprehensive report, and deliver it to David personally. Sophia would be present, of course. This time, she wouldn't just be revealing one document. She would be exposing an entire scheme that would not only devastate David, but humiliate Carla in the process. The day of the confrontation arrived, and the tension in the office was palpable. David sat in the conference room, his shoulders stiff, his jaw set. Carla was beside him, her face pale, her eyes wide and fearful. She kept glancing nervously at Sophia, as if expecting her to pounce at any moment. Elaine entered the room, followed by Randall, both carrying thick binders. They set them down on the table with a heavy thud, the sound echoing through the room like a judge's gavel. "Thank you for meeting with us, David," Elaine began, her voice smooth and professional. "We wanted to go over some findings we uncovered during our audit of the company's finances." David's jaw clenched. "What is this about?" Elaine opened the binder, flipping to a specific page. "Do you recognize these signatures?" David leaned forward, squinting. "Yeah, they're mine." "Why?" Elaine slid another document forward. "And this account number, does it look familiar?" David's eyes narrowed. "No, I don't recognize it." Elaine's smile was as sharp as a knife. "That's because it's not yours. It's Carla's." Carla's head snapped up, her eyes wide and panicked. "What? That's ridiculous." Elaine ignored her, keeping her gaze fixed on David. "Over the past 12 months, over $500,000 has been funneled into this offshore account. The authorization forms bear your signature, but the recipient is listed under a shell corporation registered to Carla's name." David's face went white. "You're lying." Elaine pulled out another document. "Here's the registration paperwork, complete with Carla's full name and address." Carla shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. This is absurd. You can't prove anything. Elaine folded her hands, her expression calm. We can, and we will. The evidence is overwhelming. Unless you'd like to explain why $500,000 suddenly disappeared from the company's account and ended up in one registered to you. David's eyes snapped to Carla, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. You did this? Carla's face twisted, her bravado crumbling. I didn't. David lunged toward her, but Randall stepped in, blocking his path. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Sophia remained seated, her expression serene, watching as the scene unraveled. David's world was falling apart, piece by piece, just as he had tried to dismantle hers. The assistant he had chosen over his wife, the woman he had trusted with his company, had been stealing from him the entire time. And now, everything was out in the open. Elaine closed the binder, standing up. Sophia will remain the majority shareholder. Carla will be facing criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. And as for you, David, well, we'll see how the company's board feels about your leadership after this. David sank back into his chair, his face buried in his hands. Carla stumbled out of the room, her heels clicking unevenly against the tile floor as she disappeared down the hallway. Sophia stood, adjusting her handbag on her shoulder. She glanced down at David, who looked up at her with hollow, bloodshot eyes. Congratulations, David, she said softly, leaning down so only he could hear. You fired the wrong woman. And with that, she walked out, her heels clicking confidently against the marble floors, the sound echoing like a victory march. Sophia didn't look back. There was no need. The life she was leaving behind was no longer hers to grieve. Ahead of her, a new chapter awaited, one in which she was not only the majority shareholder of the company, but also the woman who had reclaimed her power in her life on her own terms.